Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for narcissism in the water signs. The water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. I started this series looking at the fire signs, and I feel that the water signs in particular can really exhibit narcissistic traits. But, in terms of which element takes the cake in this particular area, it's hard to say. Definitely fire signs can show overt signs of narcissism, but with the water signs, it can be more subtle, and we could argue that the very subtle aspect of that is more dangerous in a sense, because it can cause the victim, I don't like to use that word, but the person experiencing the narcissism to question themselves. So all water signs are coming from their experiences in life, because water is all about emotion. So there is an inherent subjectivity within water signs. And you can experience this if you're a different element and you are interacting with a water sign person, you get the sense that they have a lot of feelings about things. I mean, that they are emotionally attached to their memories, to their opinions, and this is subjectivity. When you're objective, you can see things from different perspectives. You don't necessarily take one stance with a very pronounced opinion on it, and there's just more detachment, I would say. I hope I didn't repeat myself. But water signs are great in that way as well. I think water sign people give the best gifts because they can really kind of intuit, because they are naturally intuitive, what other people are feeling and how they are wired, and they know what suits them very well, even though they have that subjectivity, which you think would make them very self-centered, and that's a form of narcissism. But it can be, with the more positive water signs, it can actually give them a lot of insight into human behavior and emotional needs. Okay. Before I continue, I want to just clarify that we're talking about a disordered way of being. We're not talking about all water signs being narcissists, because I've already done the fire signs and I've gotten a couple thumbs down, and I even got a comment that suggested or implied that they thought I was talking about them. And it's like, just because you're a fire sign doesn't mean you're a narcissist. And same with the water signs. Why do people become narcissists? Well, I'm not a psychologist. I think that trauma can certainly play a role. And I also think that it could be karmic, where a person has a certain set of what do they call? They call them samskaras, I believe, in different yogic traditions. In other words, I always say some scars. My partner came up with that one, I think. But basically, the idea of, life being continuous, and you end one life with certain negative patterns, and they don't just poof go away necessarily. They're still imprinted upon your soul via your consciousness. And so these are things that you might have to work on. And being self-centered could be that type of a deal. And by the way, I said the word self-centered. Narcissism takes it to a new level, and it's not interchangeable. But I also want to say that the term narcissism that I'm using is not a clinical term. I'm simply using it to describe toxic behavior that may make other people feel less than in some way, or manipulated, where they feel guilty and they don't know why, or they feel obligated, which I guess is a form of guilt, and things like that. When you are in a relationship with somebody and you emerge from that encounter and you feel like crap, that is a good warning sign, red flag, that that person doesn't have a good effect on you. You may not be able to pinpoint why you have felt crap, because they may get in little digs that undermine your self-confidence, but you're not aware of it in a conscious sense. I don't know. I do believe we have to take responsibility for our own reactions, for sure. But by the same token, I also feel that people who belittle others or who manipulate others are toxic individuals. And as far as I'm concerned, they should be avoided whenever possible. But it's easier said than done. And that's what we're exploring in this video. And I feel like with the water signs, a lot of that trauma that may create narcissistic tendencies in these people are coming from death, abandonment, so in other words, they had an emotional attachment to somebody that was very important in their life, and that person died, or that person went away. Now, the person may not have abandoned the family in a malicious way. They may have simply gone to the military, or, when the child was young and then they were just forever split up. Or it could be even like a war where the family members are split up and the relative did not want to be separated from the child, but they had to be. There's so many different types. Even financial difficulties can separate a child from an adult that is very important to them. And it doesn't have to be an adult, I suppose. It could be a sibling who dies or is separated. Sometimes families are separated for various reasons that I just mentioned, but it's siblings who are torn apart or separated from one another. But the point being that these are people who are already wired to be more sensitive than others. And then on top of that, they experience abandonment or death. And that is like kind of the last straw, so to speak. Another reason that I think some people become narcissists, and I don't believe I mentioned this with the fire signs, is that if they are the golden child in their family of origin, in other words, if their parent or parents have chosen them as the child who can do no wrong, and the other siblings are treated in a much more inferior way, this can cause the child to believe that they are special, and that can turn them into the same sort of individual who eventually becomes a narcissist. And this is, one of the universal qualities of narcissism is a sense of entitlement, the sense of like, I'm better than other people, and therefore I don't have to play by the same rules. I get to do whatever I want to do, stepping over people's boundaries and sometimes arrogance. It all depends on the individual, obviously, but with the water signs, emotional manipulation is probably a key. And again, the ultimate goal is supply. Supply meaning having to get energy from other people. I call these narcissists energy vampires, and I realize that there is a real correlation. I think that energy vampires are narcissists. And you may have heard the term energy vampire. A lot of times it appears to me that energy vampires like to bring down the vibe in other people and that they feed off of negative vibrations. So this may be one reason why they put people down, why they try to humiliate people, or why they try to demean them, try to make them feel less than, try to make them angry. When you think of somebody who's a troll, okay, garden variety troll on the internet, they can just be people who enjoy getting a rise out of someone because they are provocative. They want to provoke people because sometimes they want people to think differently than they are. I mean, I guess I'm saying that because I think I'm kind of in that category. But it's not malicious. There is a difference. When somebody uses words, uses insults to try to make someone sad or make someone angry, and they are getting off on the drama that they're creating through the chaos, through the pain. This is what we are talking about with narcissistic behavior. And sometimes the person will seem like they really enjoy it. And drama is not the norm, nor should it ever be accepted. If you're living in any relationship, it could be even with a friend who you don't hang out with all the time, but whenever you do, they may just bring out, talk about things that complaining can be, a form of covert narcissism, where they're, people are trying to dominate the attention with their problems. Okay, so we have to understand that other people should make us feel better after we leave their presence, not worse. If you are ever in a situation where you feel like totally lacking energy, feeling bad about yourself, questioning your self-worth, after you have spent time with somebody and you feel depleted, that can be a very big sign that this person is an energy vampire and that they are saying things to you that in the moment you may not realize are indicative of this kind of behavior. But once you become savvy, then you are able to see it a mile away and you can cut these people out of your life. If you feel like it. Sometimes it's easier said than done, as I said before, because of the nature of the relationship. But anyway, let's talk about each sign individually. Cancer is the first water sign, and Cancer rules the fourth house of home and family. And oftentimes you will find that this is Cancer's domain when it comes to manipulation. As the mother, remember, parents have incredible power over their children when they are young because children are helpless. They can't go and say, you know what, I'm out of here. And also children are believing that the parent is the ultimate authority on everything. So if the parent says negative things or implies negative things to the child through what they say to the child will tend to absorb it like a sponge and not question it, even if it's not true, if it's really the projection of the parent's own sense of self-loathing and general negativity that they have not dealt with in their own life, putting it onto somebody else. But putting it onto an innocent child, that is pretty low, isn't it? Because children don't have the sophistication to be able to understand that this is happening. It isn't until they're older and they feel like they're a basket case that they realize that they have been maltreated. Okay? So we think of Cancer, we think of mothering, but then you just put an S in front of it and smothering. Being overprotective, which seems like it's a great thing, but actually what it does is it teaches the child that the world is a dangerous place. And the sense of, expecting the child to make the parent the center of their existence. Now, I use the term, I was talking about mothers, and I should have extended it to even Cancer males who are fathers, because they will exhibit a lot of those qualities that you would associate with the female. Cancer is a feminine sign, and so even the males tend to be very domestic, and they tend to be very interested in family and even having their own children. Now, one thing that is kind of interesting here, a dynamic which plays out and is very important to note, is that Cancer males sometimes, or maybe more times than not, I don't know, can become mama's boys, where their mother has become so important in their life that they treat her as almost their wife. So if you're somebody with a Cancer individual, I'm going to just say a woman for lack of, because that kind of that triangulation with the mother-in-law and the wife of a Cancer male can be a thing. Okay. So I'm saying that the Cancer male's mother can be any sign, but if you are married to a Cancer male, your woman who is having problems with your mother-in-law, there could be triangulation going on between them where the mother is not accepting this daughter-in-law, you, and as a result, it's making your husband be kind of cold to you or more loyal to the mother than to you. And so this can be a form, you could even call it like a covert narcissism, where the male Cancer is not concerned about how they are being manipulated by their own mother and how it's affecting their marriage. You could say in that particular case that the golden child, the mama's boy, is the golden child. And basically the mother of a mama's boy doesn't want their son to leave them. So they treat them like gold. They wash their laundry when they're adults. They do everything they can to keep them in that state of dependency. And when the son tries to break away in the form of getting married or something like that, then they are, with their claws out, trying to poison the well of the daughter-in-law and things like that. However, notice that I am talking here about the sign of Cancer. So I'm talking about the mama's boy as being problematic. They have to break away. If they choose not to, then they're choosing to be that covert narcissist who never grows up, who never really stands on their own 2 feet, and who doesn't express loyalty to their wife over their mother. Isn't there something in the Bible about you leave your parents and you form your own family or something like that? And that's how it should be. So anyway, getting back to the actual Cancer as a parent, the other thing too is guilting their child. Cancers take guilting to an art form, okay, to a level that no one can surpass. I mean, I am totally in awe of how Cancers can guilt others. Guilting is a form of manipulation. They may try to make other people feel sorry for them. They're always the ones that aren't getting loved. They can accuse other people of not loving them enough. And that's a smothering behavior too, because love should come freely, shouldn't it? Nobody should demand love. If somebody is not loving you enough, either your need for love is a bottomless pit of need, or you're with the wrong person. But you cannot demand love. That's counterintuitive. Love has to come in a very authentic way, in a very free way. And this is where the Cancer person sometimes doesn't quite grasp the truth of that situation, and they tend to want something that is really, I don't know, maybe even impossible for any one human being to give to them. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and in addition to being a water sign, the moon, I'm saying in addition to Cancer being a water sign, to be ruled by the moon, which is a changeable entity, can mean that they have moodiness. And, we talk about Cancer the crab and crabbiness. Using moods to dominate a situation, a family environment, a workplace. If you're somebody who is an empath, and I consider myself one, but I'm also a fire sign, a Sagittarian. So I try to, I'm not, I might be passionate, but I'm not really emotional in the sense that I wear my heart on my sleeve, okay? I try to be positive when I'm out and about. But there are some people, they wear their heart on their sleeve. And so if they get up on the wrong side of the bed, everyone is going to know it. They're grumpy. And that is a pet peeve of mine, okay? Because what happens is moods can be very infectious, okay? If somebody has a positive vibe, you feel energized when you're in their presence, right? Well, to be moody on a regular basis, and that would imply the more negative types of emotions, can be a form of covert narcissism where they draw attention to their sadness or their irritation, their irritability towards everyone in the office, everyone in the family, everyone in whatever group that you belong to. And so some empaths who want everybody to be healed constantly will say, Sally, is everything okay? How are you feeling? Blah, blah, blah. And that gives them supply. They get the attention, so they get the supply. And they can also get supply when other people feel bummed out. And then the other people start snapping at other people. getting irritable because, and they don't even know why, but it's because this person is such a negative influence, because people are picking up on the negative vibes. So let's talk about Scorpio. Scorpio can use control. Well, let's not say use control. Scorpio wants power, okay? It's a very acute need for Scorpio, especially for those who don't feel powerful innately, okay? And again, trauma. If it seems that Scorpio, because Scorpio rules the 8th house, and part of the 8th house is death, and also sex, other people's money. Notice how all three of those topics can indicate issues surrounding power. The ultimate feeling of powerlessness comes from the death of another person in any way, whether it's an accident or a long drawn-out death. When you cannot control how somebody leaves your presence, which with death you cannot control most of the time, so that can create a feeling of helplessness within Scorpio if it happens when they're very young. And to try to counter that feeling, which is very uncomfortable for Scorpio to feel powerless, there's like a maladaptation, that occurs where they utilize certain negative patterns or traits or behaviors, I should say, to try to get their needs met. So an example of trying to maintain power is by being secretive. When you're meeting somebody and you're dating them and you're talking about your life story, but you leave out some very important aspects of it that maybe make you seem more vulnerable. Maybe you don't tell somebody right away that your father died when you were 5 years old, or that you were molested when you were 10 years old. You don't tell them that because you don't want to seem like you have had trauma and therefore are damaged from it. You want to appear to be invulnerable. And a lot of times people can sense when others are not being totally open. Especially with Scorpio, because even physically, a Scorpio person gives off this mysterious vibe. And other people may be like, what is this person thinking? What's going on behind those eyes? The other thing that Scorpio has a tendency to do is feel suspicion very easily. This is likely due to abandonment issues, trauma that I was talking about when somebody leaves their presence, maybe suddenly, and that can be one of their greatest fears. So an extension of abandonment is disloyalty that creates a cheating situation, and therefore an abandonment if their partner leaves them for another person. So being overly suspicious is really a form of fear that the other person could possibly go and leave them for another individual, fall in love with somebody else, cheat. And so you've heard that expression, the best defense is a good offense. So these types of relationships with a Scorpio I'm talking about specifically a romantic relationship, can involve the Scorpio constantly accusing the other person of cheating, or calling a lot, excessively calling the other person during the day, grilling them like a prosecuting attorney, and trying to figure out if their story is, they can keep their story straight, and these kinds of things. And what is so concerning about this is that depending on the individual Scorpio, if they are very damaged and very afraid of being left, this can lead to obsession. Scorpio, in the lower expression, in the shadow sense, can take this fear and it can just be an overriding issue in their life. And that can lead to really becoming quite controlling and trying to use every trick in the book to keep their partner weak, keep them feeling like they may even be guilty, kind of gaslighting them to the point where the person feels like, wow, maybe I did do these things. Sometimes people have confessed to crimes they didn't commit. And of course, torture could be involved in some of those cases. But in some cases, I think even just constant suggestion, can lead the person to get so gaslit, if that's the past tense, that they start to believe their own false guilt, or, that they actually did something that they didn't really do. Scorpio's a natural psychologist because the 8th house deals with the workings of the human psyche, in the sense that of the underlying things that are going on beneath the surface of the individual. So this makes them particularly dangerous when they are exhibiting such a shadow, to be able to get inside of somebody's head and know what makes them tick, and then to use it against them. So I'm going to be talking about coping strategies for these people, but just keep in mind that when you're dealing with a Scorpio person, you're dealing with you're playing with fire. Scorpios can be very noble, so it's very important to bring that out. But the ones that are on the dark side can be, this is where the rep of Scorpio comes from, with that dark side, okay? Because they can be very smart and very intuitive and know exactly what buttons to push in others to get their supply. With Pisces, this is the classic covert narcissist, because Pisces is a sign associated with martyrdom and learned helplessness. So with Pisces, I think the trauma can often come from the garden variety abuse. It could be physical abuse, sexual abuse, which you could say is a form of physical abuse or violence, and or emotional abuse. A lot of times, I personally feel when I'm doing a chart of somebody who has a prominent planet in Pisces, that's a lot of P's, that they probably have dealt with some sort of trauma. They may have had a parent who had mental illness or addiction, and the child had to parent the parent. And so they grow up with this caretaking tendency. And this is where a covert narcissist is born, because here's another thing that I should have mentioned. All of these signs are coming from a place where they did not get their emotional needs met. So they're trying to gain this supply in order to get their needs met. That's really, how we can put it. Yes, it's very twisted and it's so destructive to other people in the process, but that is how, in a nutshell, we can describe why they're doing this. Like, what purpose does it ultimately serve? So with Pisces, that tendency to see themselves as victims and almost seem to want others to pity them instead of respect them, and not understand that there is a big difference between those two tendencies is what is at play here. And so the covert narcissist dominates others through their problems. And they may be imitating a parent. Maybe they had a parent, as I said, who, for instance, if you have a parent who has an addiction, who is typically going to be forced to take care of other siblings, to, buy the groceries if there is nobody else in the household that can, the child. But that doesn't mean that the Pisces individual doesn't have needs of their own. Those needs never go away. As a matter of fact, they can be magnified as the child grows older, because the more they're caretaking others, the more they feel this sense of emptiness. When, in fact, when you are taking care of others and it's a good energy exchange, you feel a sense of purpose. You feel like you're doing something good. But when you are taking care of somebody that should be taking care of themselves, and maybe they have an addiction, maybe they are just problematic in their personality traits, where they can't keep a job because they're not willing to compromise, they're not willing to do what is asked of them, to cooperate, and you try to, clean up their messes, that is just going to feel draining. That's not going to feel good. Your soul knows the difference, whether you're helping somebody or enabling them. And so the Pisces person is the garden variety martyr, and they may wear this on their sleeve. Oh, I have to, complaining a lot to people, which can cause draining in others. Other people can feel like they just don't enjoy the company of this Pisces individual, but the person may act really sweet and they feel guilty of even thinking of, not being around them, because this person may do nice things. They may not put down the person that they are with, but they are constantly sucking people's attention through their own sob stories, their own needs for other people to give them attention through sympathy. So ultimately, that can create problems. The other thing the Pisces person can do is be the poster child for the victim mentality. So they can be an addict, and they can suck up attention that way by being the person who needs to be taken care of because they can't take care of themselves. Maybe even, I won't say hypochondria, which, by the way, this can be something with cancer, being a hypochondriac. But I think Pisces as well, health issues that, or some kind of other issues. I can't think of that. What's that syndrome? Munchausen's syndrome. It's that really unusual syndrome where the parent makes their child sick or pretends that their child is sick so that they can get attention. This is covert narcissism. The person is trying to manipulate others to gain attention. So however that plays out, that could be what Pisces is doing. And so they're coming from a position of weakness, not being afraid of appearing like the poor soul, the person who always has something going wrong in their life. Some people try to hide their problems because they don't want to appear that way. With Pisces, when they are in this narcissistic stranglehold, they can tend to gravitate towards that and have no problem playing that role. So what do we do about this? Especially if it's somebody close to us, like a family member. Well, it's important not to allow yourself to become degraded in the process. One of the things that I think happens initially when we feel that we are being victimized, but we don't quite know why and how, is that we get angry. And in that anger, sometimes we get a bit harsh. And I know myself, it's like you feel, it's crazy making how sometimes these people are behaving where you can't necessarily pinpoint what's going on. And sometimes when you try to express yourself and saying, you're saying this and that about me, and they say, wow, you're so sensitive. That's the classic gaslighting phrase. You're too sensitive when you are in fact an empath a lot of times. I've noticed in these narcissist videos on YouTube that they are tying in the empath to it. And that was the turning point for me in watching those videos, is that I understood that there is a dynamic going on the spiritual level where people who are empathic have to learn to stand up for themselves. And unfortunately, when people are trying to disengage from destructive people or just develop their own sense of self, they can go overboard and they can be a little bit too angry, too nasty, because they don't know how to control their anger at the situation that may have been building up for a long time. Because sometimes when we discover what has really been going on, it is such a shock to the system. And take it from me, I'm somebody, I feel like I can perceive things pretty well, but sometimes you misunderstand what another person is doing, and when it finally dawns on you, it's not necessarily that victims of narcissists are in denial. Sometimes that might be really true, but other times it might simply be that they are seeing things in a way that is not the full picture. And some of these individuals can be very crafty in getting you to believe that it's your problem, your faulty perception. So the first step is even realizing there's a problem, that somebody is affecting you in a way that is very destructive to you. Being forced, if you will, to be around a toxic personality for extended periods of time can actually lead to health problems, I would say. You may find that you feel better when you're not in somebody's presence. But what about if you're just visiting once a month or on holidays? And even that can rub off on you, because if you just see this toxic narcissistic personality that happens to be a water sign, and it's only like a few times a year, usually on holidays, and you dread holidays or you dread birthdays, and you know that it's tied to being forced to see this person, ask yourself why you're putting yourself in that position. And if it's a family situation, maybe it's an in-law or even your own family, and you really feel like it would be totally rocking the boat to avoid this person altogether, you can figure out coping strategies. Maybe you only stay for an hour and you say, oh yeah, I'd love to see you. You know, I'm going to be doing other things that day, but I will definitely stop by and say hello. And if that person tries to guilt you and say, you know, I hardly ever see you all during the year, and then you're only seeing me for an hour, you can take it from there, and you can decide whether or not that is something that you even want to be a part of at all. Because one of the things with water signs and narcissism is that there's a sense of entitlement to that relationship, or with that relationship. And this is where families really come into the picture, because with the water signs, family tends to be very important, and that is a great place to get supply from the family, because the family is held up as this ideal group of people, when in fact you share DNA. Sometimes the DNA that you share will be matched with sharing mutual admiration or just mutual respect, but sometimes not so much. Sometimes you could have a family that is your worst enemy or filled with your worst enemies. So don't get swayed by the propaganda that family is always an ideal. Sometimes it's the worst thing that a person deals with, and perfect strangers are much more, kinder to them than their own family members. But the water sign narcissist will tout the family as the end-all be-all. And of course, their modus operandi is to get permanent supply. You can't divorce your family. But even though you can't legally divorce your family, you don't have to hang around them if they are toxic. I just had a bittersweet experience. I wanted to quote John Bradshaw, who was I'm seeing here on Wikipedia, they say he was an American educator, counselor, motivational speaker, and author who hosted a number of PBS television programs on topics such as addiction, recovery, codependency, and spirituality. And I remember him, I guess motivational speaker would be the proper title. Now, this was before Wayne Dyer was as big as he is, okay? Or as he was, because he passed away too. But I just found out that John Bradshaw passed away in 2016. And I didn't know about that, or maybe I forgot. But he was the one, I think, who really championed the inner child. But he one time said, family is a cult. And I never forgot that one. And he was a Cancer. So even somebody who is born under the sign of Cancer does not necessarily fall for the okie doke that the family is the end-all be-all, because that can really guilt people into sticking around for some very sick situations that you don't want to be a part of. And, one of his big topics was adult children of alcoholics. And because of that, like the dysfunctional family, because of that, that just goes to show that just because you are part of a family doesn't mean that they are good influences on you or that it is healthy to be around them. I think sometimes when you're dealing with water signs, you have to make sure that you know exactly what you want to do about the situation. I personally feel that water signs are sensitive even when they're acting insensitive. So I mentioned being very straightforward with narcissists who are fire signs. With water signs, I do believe in being more sensitive, but this can just involve gradually reducing contact with the person rather than just cutting it off abruptly. Just, creating the normal situation where you're seeing them on an infrequent basis, weaning off of them or having them wean off of you. If you're dealing with somebody who is accusing you falsely of things and trying to put you in a state of constant defense mode, stop defending yourself. But you can make a statement and say, you know what? You can believe whatever you want to believe, but I am through defending myself. I know the truth, and I don't need to defend myself. And then follow through. Again, if you're dealing with constant negative behaviors, it doesn't make any sense to be around such people, if at all possible, because it will very likely affect you adversely, and it's meaningless. It just drains energy. If you're dealing with somebody who is a covert narcissist, it's important to let them know that they are responsible for their own life. What you can do is you can give them material to help them to learn how to be more independent and positive. And you can say to them, I wish you the best. I want the best for you, but I know that I can't make you happy by listening to your complaints. That's not going to create abundance in your life, is by me listening to you complain. It's not going to create it in my life. It's not going to create it in your life. So in order for us to create abundance, we have to focus on that which we wish to increase. Not focus on the things that we are upset about, but focus on those things that we want to see increase. Because we only have certain hours in the day to accomplish things. And if we spend it complaining, we're in a constant state of disempowerment. And then you just, if there is a covert narcissist and you feel that they're not an evil person and that they are just incredibly disempowered, one of the phrases you can say is really, like if they say, oh, my son has, he's just canceled his trip here. I was really counting on it. And then, this is a form of complaint. They're the victim, pity party. You can say, really? And it means absolutely nothing. And that's the beauty of it. So you're not feeding into their sense of victimhood. You're just giving some response, but you're giving a meaningless response. Try it. You'll like it. It's a really good one. Okay, you guys. Well, that's what I have for you, and I hope that you enjoyed this. Take care. Bye.